in the immediate aftermath of the informal leaders' meeting in Cyprus last week, which focused on the EU's contribution to de-escalation, freedom of navigation and addressing the impact on energy prices. It is abundantly clear that the ongoing crisis in the Middle East carries profound global repercussions that directly impact the Union's security environment and interests. As noted in this hemicycle last month, this conflict is neither abstract nor distant. Quite the contrary. It is in our neighbourhood. It has wide-ranging consequences on our security and economies, and it requires us, as European Union, to actively engage and act in unity with a coherent and coordinated approach. Acting in unity also requires clarity of messaging and action, including on what to achieve in the long run. These include restoring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz in line with international law and UNCLOS, with no caveats or restrictions, working and contributing towards de-escalation that can pave the way for a lasting ceasefire and long-term peace and stability, and working to ensure that Iran does not acquire or develop the capacity to produce nuclear weapons. To achieve these objectives, our cooperation with our Middle East and Gulf partners is not merely important, it is a necessity. The Union has maintained regular and close contact at different levels with countries in the region. We have expressed solidarity with our regional partners who have been attacked and affected by this war. Partners who have shown to be reliable even in the midst of attacks on their territory. And we have reiterated our commitment to work with them for stability, while at the same time working to expand our dialogue and our strategic cooperation. In this regard, we have welcomed the ceasefire agreed by the United States and Iran on the 9th of April. We encourage parties to continue engaging in good faith. Diplomacy remains the only viable path towards restoring stability. The EU will continue to contribute to all diplomatic efforts in line with its consistent, reliable role, drawing on its diplomatic reach, experience, and long-term partnerships. These core messages were clearly articulated both by the European Union and regional leaders last Friday in Nicosia in a productive meeting in the margins of the informal leaders meeting between the European Union and leaders from Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and the Gulf. Honourable members, as mentioned, safeguarding freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz is a primary concern, given the massive impact on EU competitiveness, the energy market, and the impact on prices and cost of living. Disruption to energy and global trade flows and prices trigger ripple effects on fertilizer supply, on food prices, on economic growth, as well as on investment partners. In the context of safeguarding freedom of navigation, the role of EU Maritime Defensive Operation Aspides, that is providing a critical contribution to keeping one of the world's most vital waterways open and secure, is critical. In parallel, the Council is fully committed to working on new proposals that would help to mitigate the impact of the crisis on energy prices. Directly reflecting the conclusions agreed during the European Council in March, the One Europe, One Market roadmap, which was co-signed in Cyprus in the margins of the Informal Leaders Summit by the three institutions. There is no silver bullet. As long as the EU continues to depend on imported fossil fuels, we will remain vulnerable to price spikes. It is clear that European strategic autonomy, European independence, goes hand in hand with energy security. That is why it is essential to stay the course on our energy transition goals in expanding domestically generated and affordable energy, together with short-term measures agreed to mitigate energy spikes. Our strategy is twofold. On the one hand, implementing immediate measures to stabilize energy prices, while simultaneously forging a robust energy union to secure our long-term strategic independence. The grids package is an essential part of this effort. Regarding fertilizers, we're looking forward to receiving the Commission's action plan, in the context of which we look to short-term measures to respond to the current circumstances, as well as measures to increase the resilience of the EU agricultural sector by reducing our reliance on imports. While we tackle the effects of the conflict in Iran, we cannot lose sight of the other sources of tension in the Middle East. Lebanon is paying a heavy price for a war it did not choose. Too many have lost their lives, and we have seen attacks on UN peacekeepers which are unacceptable. We welcome the ceasefire and ongoing preparatory talks under US auspices, and we urge all sides to end hostilities and fully respect Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We also cannot lose sight of the situation in Gaza and the West Bank. There needs to be progress on the implementation of the Gaza peace plan, in the absence of which there is a risk of undermining the fragile political momentum with all that this entails, including providing Hamas with the opportunity to consolidate control. The EU remains committed to do its part with all the tools at its disposal. In this framework, we convened last week two important international meetings in Brussels, that of the Global Alliance and that of the Ad Hoc Liaison Committee. Ultimately, just and sustainable peace can only be reached on the basis of a two-state solution in line with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rauna. Now I give the floor to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Thank you very much, Madam President, dear Roberta, Deputy Minister Rauna, dear Marilena, honourable members. The informal UCO started with good news for Europe and Ukraine. In spring, we have said that we would deliver on the 90 billion loan for Ukraine one way or the other. Now we made good on this promise. We will disperse the first tranche of 45 billion euros for 2026, still this quarter, 1/3 for budgetary needs and 2/3 go to Ukraine's defense. And the first defense package will be on drones from Ukraine to Ukraine, worth some 6 billion euros. So our message is very clear. We will continue our support to the brave Ukrainian people and their armed forces. While Russia is doubling down on its aggression, Europe doubles down on our support for Ukraine. That day, we also adopted the 20th sanction package. And yes, the sanctions are biting. They have a biting effect on the Russian economy, with inflation increasing and interest rates skyrocketing. The consequences of Russia's war of choice are also being paid for out of Russian people's pockets, so much so that the Kremlin responds in an unusual way by restricting the internet and free communication. So much so that Russians feel that they live behind an iron curtain again, this time a digital iron curtain. But, honourable members, if history has one lesson, it's that all walls eventually fall. Honourable members, it's been exactly 2 months since the new war in the Middle East began, and we are finally witnessing a lull after weeks of violence. We all want the ceasefire in Iran and Lebanon to hold, with the ultimate goal to re-establish peace and stability through diplomatic means. We were joined in Cyprus by leaders from Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and the Secretary General of the GCC. And this was an opportunity to reiterate our solidarity with partners. Our shared goal is now to see a lasting end to the war. And this includes restoring full and permanent freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz without tolls. And it is equally clear that any peace agreement will have to address Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program. But there's also a harsh reality we all need to face. The consequences of this conflict may echo for months or even years to come. And this is why energy was on the top of the informal UKOS agenda. This is the second energy crisis within 4 years. And the lesson should be very clear. Our overdependency on imported fossil fuels makes us vulnerable. And let me give you 2 figures. In just 60 days of conflict, our bill for fossil fuel imports has increased by over 27 billion euros, without one single molecule of energy in addition. So the way forward is obvious. We must reduce our overdependency on imported fossil fuels, and we must boost our homegrown, affordable, clean energy supply from renewables to nuclear in full respect of technology neutrality. Already today, member states with more low-carbon sources in their energy mix are less impacted by the crisis. Take a country like Sweden. If there the gas price increases by €1 per megawatt hour, the electricity bill only increases by 0.04 euros per megawatt hour. Because almost all of Sweden's electricity comes from renewables and nuclear. So this is how we insulate ourselves from future shocks, and this is the path to independence of Europe. Honourable members, as I said, every member state has a different energy mix. Therefore, a blanket solution, one size fits all, to address the current crisis would simply not work. And this is why last week we presented a whole toolbox of measures that can be combined differently in different parts of the Union. And I want to focus on 3 sets of measures. The first is increased coordination at the European level. At the start of the previous energy crisis, there was a rush to the gas markets, and this contributed to driving prices up. We basically were competing against ourselves at the global market. That's why at that time we stepped up European coordination, for instance, with common gas procurement. This time, we're taking the same approach, one step further. We propose stronger coordination not only in filling national gas storage, but also when it comes to fuel reserves, especially jet fuels and diesel, where markets are tightening. We can be so much more effective if we coordinate the release of oil stocks and if we make sure that refineries can step up production all across our union. Because together we have the market power and we have the industrial might, so let's put it at the service of all Europeans. Second point, we have to protect consumers and businesses. And there is a lesson to be learned from the last crisis. Measures should be targeted to the most vulnerable households and industries only, and we should avoid increasing the demand for oil and gas at this time. Let me give you again a figure. During the last crisis, only 1/4 of the emergency support was targeted to vulnerable households and businesses. In other words, more than 350 billion euros were spent on untargeted measures. And this had a huge impact on member states' finances, and it also undermined the measures to protect those most in need. So let's not make the same mistake again, and let's focus our support where it matters most. And my third point is we must reduce energy demand by modernizing systemic energy use. In the short term, we can do this through a combination of energy efficiency and electrification. But we should also keep in mind that overall, we will need energy in abundance, especially because of a rapid scale-up of data centers and artificial intelligence. Since the last crisis, we have already made great progress. In 2022, Gas determined our electricity prices for 70% of the time. Today, this is down to 30%. And that is why this time we have avoided the huge price spikes of the previous crisis. But electricity still represents less than a quarter of our final energy consumption. And this is much lower as, for example, in the United States or China. So this has to and this will change. A continent like ours, with limited fossil fuels resources, should lead the world on electrification. This is the reason why last December we proposed the grids package. Its goal is to make our energy and infrastructure fit for the electrification age. And I'm very glad that last week in Cyprus, the European Parliament, the Council agreed to speed up the negotiations. And as a next step, we will put forward our electrification action plan by the summer with an ambitious electrification target. And speaking of finances, in the current European budget, we have set aside almost 300 billion euros for energy, 95 billion of which are not used so far. I know I'm preaching here almost in the wrong church, but let us use this to make the switch now to electricity, not just in transport, but also in industry and in heating. This is not only a matter of affordability and competitiveness, this is also, as we learn in this crisis, a matter of economic security. Thus, speaking of European independence means it is the moment to electrify Europe. And finally, a few words on MFF. We also discussed at the informal council in Cyprus. We all know that the next budget is central to our competitiveness agenda. It can de-risk investment and crowd in private capital. It can fund strategic priorities at real European scale. It can support reforms that make Europe a better place to invest. But we must be lucid about the budgetary equation. From 2028 onwards, we will have to start to pay back Next Generation EU. We need to invest more in our new priorities, like research and development, competitiveness, defense, security, you name it. We want to sustain funding for EU's long-standing priorities, that is cohesion and the CAP. And we want to keep national contributions in check. If this is the case, all four elements, the budgetary equation is clear. New own resources are indispensable. Without them, the choice is stark: higher national contributions or lower spending. In other words, less Europe exactly when more Europe is needed. This is why the Commission has proposed a comprehensive package of new own resources, a package that is diversified, linked to our union's policies, and capable of generating stable revenues over time. This is the only credible way to match Europe's priorities with Europe's means. Thank you very much, and long live Europe.
Thank you very much, President von der Leyen. And now the first round of political group speakers, starting with the President of the EPP Group, Manfred Weber.
Madam President of the European Parliament, Commission, Council representative, dear colleagues, a lot is on our table. I want to highlight from an EPP point of view three issues from content perspective. First is Europe needs urgently economic growth. And we know what to do. Simplification started already, trade is on a good way, investments, we yesterday agreed on a strong MFF for the future. But the key of everything is the single market, our own economic base. And that's why having the clear projects in mind, 28th regime, energy grids, capital market union, after 2 years of Draghi, it's now a good moment that in Cyprus we agreed on the roadmap, that we have the first time, a binding understanding how to implement with clear milestones the single market strategy until the end of 27. That's a great step forward and also for us a responsibility now to deliver. The second thing I want to mention is obviously in light with the economic developments in Europe, the energy costs, geopolitical situation behind. You know, this crisis proves again that we need more sovereignty on our energy supply. Renewable energies are the future, and to fight against climate change is not anymore only an ecological issue, it is obviously an issue for a sovereign Europe. So that's why the EPP stands on the side of the ETS1. We want to make it pragmatic in the implementation, but we stick to what we have agreed in the last years. We also have to finalize the energy market, especially with the energy grids package. We have to have a careful look on the fertilizers because that's important, and we need a nuclear as a base. That's the truth, otherwise sovereignty will not work. And the third point I want to mention is Nikos Christodoulidis in Cyprus did the efforts to put the Article 42.7 on the table, so the military dimension of our European solidarity, and that's urgently needed. EPP was pushing for a defense committee inside of the parliament. We have the first time now a defense commissioner, an EPP friend, who is chairing this, and we want to do now the next step. Clear rules for implementing Article 42.7. People see and feel the uncertainty, especially in Cyprus, and Europe has to give an answer. Dear colleagues, that is on content what I want to mention. Let me finally reflect on two member states' developments, which are for us of special importance. First of all, I want to say a word on Romania. Last year, Romanian people voted for their leadership, and I was quite happy that finally the candidate from our didn't become president of Romania, that the pro-European forces fought and they won, and that was an important battle in Romania. EPP and Socialists together had the mandate to reform Romania, to do the necessary steps together with the milestones presented by the Commission. Yesterday, Socialists and our party together presented a motion of censure against the pro-European stable government. And Irache, I just asked myself, why? What is the background of this? What is the reasoning for taking such a government now into question? Together with Aura, I just want to say if EPP would do the same against the socialist prime minister, to take a socialist prime minister into question together with a right populistic party, you know, we would have here thousands of initiatives in the European Parliament. That's not my style of doing things. I just ask the question, and probably you can also clarify from the socialists whether you want to go further with the cooperation with Aura in the future. And the second thing I want to mention is because we still have positive news. We still have very positive news, and that is that we saw the young people in the streets of Budapest a few weeks ago, where they were telling the audience, the public, Russia out and we are Europeans. I was myself 2 years ago in Budapest, welcomed to the party inside of our EPP team, a great moment that they repaid now the trust we invested into them. That's great to see that Peter Magyar, together with the TISA friends, really won back Hungarian votes and people for a pro-European approach. We are proud about this, and we see the first results now with the 90 billion being now released and being now ready to be transformed towards the Ukrainian friends. And the populists and extremists in Europe lost their spin doctor. So the Putin's puppets, those who are defending Chinese and Russian and other interests in the European Council and other formats, have lost their leader. That's great, good news for all of us. Dear colleagues, we won. Slogans are not anymore winning. Solutions are winning. Europe and future solutions won in Hungary. Thank you for the TISA friends for this success story.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the President of the S&D Group, Irache Garcia Perez.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Mr. Weber, if you're going to teach lessons, then make sure they're the right ones. I mean, the Popular Party in Spain is currently concluding agreements with the far right, with one principle, national priority. So you're comparing that with a xenophobic party like Orban's. But if you're going to give us lessons, please make sure they're the right ones. Anyway, let me move on to the subject of today's debate. 2 months ago, an illegal and irresponsible war against Iran was begun by Trump and Netanyahu. They promised a rapid war of freedom, but actually they've sowed destruction, death and fanaticism. And now we see a trail of blood extending from Iran to Gaza via the West Bank and Lebanon. And in Lebanon, we're talking about 2,000 dead, 1.2 million people displaced, and the occupation of 10% of its territory. That's not security. I think we could safely call that devastation. And given that, Mrs. von der Leyen, Europe can't simply stand and watch. We can't watch history happening. We need to be the guarantor of the international law, democracy and peace. Now, let me say this loudly and clearly. We support the right of Israel to defend itself against Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Revolutionary Guards. But that doesn't include crimes against humanity, and they have crossed all red lines. And we've heard nothing at all from you, Mr. Weber and Mrs. von der Leyen, on the adoption of the death penalty law against Palestinians. That's utterly unacceptable. That hurts me. And if it hurts me, imagine what those millions of Europeans feel who don't understand Europe's complicit silence. So we are not going to be quiet on this. We want facts. Suspend the association agreement with Israel. Let's have sanctions imposed on the Netanyahu government. And I would also say to you, Manfred, and the EPP, complacency has one name: servitude. Servitude to those who are dynamiting the international order, which is based on rules. Servitude, which weakens Europe and makes our citizens poorer. Because the war is not only killing people over there, it also strikes us here. It strikes European families with high electricity bills. It strikes workers because inflation is back. And it's striking our economies because we have this energy dependency that makes us vulnerable. So recommendations aren't enough at this point. We need to act. We need leadership. We need clear, brave and fair measures. We need a European tax on the windfall profits made by oil companies which are making money out of this war. We need to decouple the prices of gas and electricity so that people can have cheaper energy bills right away. We need to make state aid rules more flexible, and we need to activate the escape clause for the Stability and Growth Pact. We need to protect the most vulnerable, social energy rates, stopping supply being cut off to those who can't pay. We also need to reactivate tools such as SURE to protect jobs. And above all, we need to firmly act in favour of the Green Deal, because the only way that we can break this dependency that makes us poorer is to speed up the transition towards renewable energies. Let's not fall into the far-right trap and dilute the Green Deal. The Green Deal is not the problem, it's the solution. Europe has the resources, Europe has the talent and has the strength. What's missing is political will. If you're really concerned about citizens, ladies and gentlemen, show it. Europe was born from the ashes of war to defend peace, dignity and justice. And now we're seeing people who want to impose the law of the jungle. But we need to decide what kind of Europe we want to build. We, the Social Democrats, are clear on that. We want a Europe that doesn't bend the knee to power, that defends the law, a Europe that protects its citizens and leads for peace. That's the Europe that we're going to fight for, and that's the Europe we're going to be working for. Thank you.
The PFE group, I give the floor to Antonio Tanger Correa.
Vou falar em português.
I'll be speaking in Portuguese. Madam President, President of the Commission, Presidency of the Council, I was hoping we were going to have a debate on the EU strategy on the ongoing Middle East crisis. Apparently that's not the case. Nevertheless, I will continue with the notes I had prepared. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Europe is suffering through a crisis, but we are failing when it comes to deciding how to respond to the crisis. It's true that the EU receives only 5% of its oil via the Strait of Hormuz. But the prices, the increases in prices, seem to imply that all of our oil comes via this strait, which is not the case. The increases in prices means that we are all suffering, and a Europe which is following the increase in oil prices, well, it really means we have to ask some questions. Europe is not dependent on the routes which were affected by the blockades, but are paying the prices as though we were, not just for energy, but across the board. We are faced with a union which is unable to react, because whilst we hesitate, others are profiting from this. And who pays the bill at the end of the day? Our business, our farmers, our fishers, millions of families who are suffering from this energy shocks. It is now time for us to take responsibility here. We don't need more or greater coordination, more measures, more actions. What we need to do is protect our citizens. We shouldn't continue to prolong this problem. Thank you.
On behalf of the ECR group, to its co-chair, Nicola Procaccini.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, President von der Leyen. The crisis in the Middle East reminds us that our freedom is only on loan if we continue to be held hostage by the demands of others. The threat posed by Iran was not invented by Israel or the US. The European Union shouldn't let itself be dragged into military adventures, but it should not either forget what its role is in the world, in the divide between Western democracies and those regimes that govern Iran, Russia, North Korea, and China. Being strong doesn't just mean being well armed, but also being independent of others for our own economy. Europe's main problem today is that it's unable to produce energy, not only from wind or solar, but also from nuclear and its own fossil gas and oil deposits. It prefers to buy energy from elsewhere, often from those regimes I talked about before. Pedro Sanchez, over the last month, has increased by 124% his purchase of liquid gas from Putin. Not Orban, Sanchez. He has gone further than anybody to increase imports of gas from Russia, becoming de facto the biggest European sponsor of Putin's war in Ukraine. Then we give a loan of 90 billion euros to Ukraine to defend themselves from the person that we have funded. Genius. On that subject, at 12:33 of a year ago, the 28th of April, Spain had the biggest blackout in European history. This caused deaths and injuries as well as huge economic damage. It was caused by the disruption to the sources of renewable energy. I'm not demonizing them, as I don't demonize other sources of energy. We need all of them. The only thing we don't need is the left's hypocrisy, which has condemned us to the Green Deal, to measures such as CBAM, which drives up the cost of importing those fertilizers that are actually banned in Europe in terms of their production. We will continue to be dependent on others, and when we are, we will never truly be free and safe. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to the chair of the Renew Europe group, Valérie Haye.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, President. Well, Europeans' purchasing power is going down. We can blame Trump, we can talk about the Straits of Hormuz, but at the end of the day, we make our own choices. And what's going on in the Middle East is not an excuse, because for over 50 years now, Europeans have been dependent on energy that's produced outside Europe. 50 years that we've struggled to react. Iran today, the COVID pandemic, the war in Ukraine. We all know that the question isn't whether there'll be a future crisis. The question is when. But we are spending 400 billion on the imports of fossil fuels at the moment. That's 400 billion that we're sending abroad. And we could be spending here. So we need to say that's enough. We need to defend our energy independence. We need to end a system that weakens our purchasing power and which boosts dictators. We need to stop feeding into populism and extremists right across Europe. But it's not enough just to talk about this. We need to act, and that's what we've been trying to get people to do since 2019. The Commission is acting as well. Accelerate EU, which you presented last week, the Green Deal. It's also European preferences in terms of industry, nuclear power and renewables. Colleagues, the way to our independence is to decarbonise our economies, electrification, but we really need to act. We need those reforms that are necessary in terms of our markets, our infrastructure and assistance to households. We need to think at the European level and act for the long term. Now, obviously, we need to change our productive model if we're actually going to do that. The ways we consume, the way we build our housing, the way we eat. And Renew wants to see that done in a responsible manner. But the fact is that not everyone has made the same choices. Even today, in spite of all the evidence, in spite of what all experts say, in spite of the demands of our citizens, there are people in this hemicycle on the right who wants to do away with the Green Deal. Apparently, this is a green ideology, a pact for degrowth. That's what they say. But where do ideologies come from? I mean, those who see the reality of the world, they're the people we have on one side, but then on the other side we have people who want to import Russian gas, who are the ideologists here, because the Green Deal is far more than just environmental policy, although that's important. It's a deal for competitiveness. It's something that works for the independence of Europe. It's something that we should have been doing for 50 years, and it's something that science and technology makes possible now. Colleagues, let me now mention something else. We need to speed up the Green Deal and speed up on our energy independence, and we can only do that by working with a pro-European majority. Thank you.
Merci. Now the co-chair of the Greens Group, Bas Eickhout.
Thank you, Madam President. The US and Israeli illegal attacks on Iran have sparked a global energy crisis. And because of these attacks, the 6 largest oil companies, half of which are American, are raking in profits of nearly $3,000 per second, while people can barely afford the fuel. Let me be clear. This is not our war, and we shouldn't pay for it. Europe should stand up for peace, stability, and justice in the Middle East. We need to shield, at the same time, our societies from leaders like Trump. As long as we are dependent on fossil fuels, our well-being in Europe is in the hands of unreliable autocrats. Europe can only be a stable and credible global power if our own European industry supplies us with our own energy. Going fossil-free is our path to freedom. This means we have to make clear political choices. And in the last week's communication by the Commission, you did a first step. But what are we meanwhile doing? We applaud our best tool to price carbon, emission trading. But at the same time, the Commission proposes to emit millions of extra allowances to pollute. We say we want to electrify, but at the same time, we weaken the best instrument to electrify our car park, CO2 standards for cars. And we say we want homegrown energy, but at the same time, we are concluding a deal with the US, a trade deal with the US, which promises to import more American gas. This inconsistent behavior weakens our transition, and the citizens pay the price, not the fossil companies. These 6 companies are making around 94 billion euros of fossil fuel profits a year, money that could power millions of people with clean and affordable energy. But the Commission refuses to tax the windfall profits of fossil giants. Let's be clear, this energy transition is not a sacrifice, it's an upgrade. And none of this happens spontaneously overnight. These solutions require investment. They require consistent, forward-looking policies. Say what we had. We called it the Green Deal. Let's make sustainable choices the obvious competitive choice over fossil fuels. The EU should take the lead. It's our political choices that decide whether this future belongs to all or only to a few. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eickhout. And now for the Left Group, its co-chair, Martin Schildewan.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you, Madam President. But those of us, or those with less money, are really feeling the impact on their wallets, given the crisis in the Middle East. And I think that the discussion on the EU strategy and how we react to this crisis, well, we need to take a different approach. Here we just hear keywords such as strategy, and we're not talking about the substance. And the centre parties seem to be more concerned about working with the far right than anything else. And your cooperation with the right and your exchange of barbs means that the right is going to get stronger and stronger. We need to limit the repercussions of the energy price shock. And once again, Madam von der Leyen, you seem to be sitting back helpless. And the biggest oil companies are making vast profits out of this crisis. And the consequence of the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is really being felt. And this ridiculous situation means that energy companies are profiting off the suffering of our citizens, the poorest citizens. We need a Europe-wide energy price cap at the pump so that people can afford to live, that they can plan for their future, and European jobs can be protected. It has already been said that this is not our war. The USA and Israel began the war. Trump and Netanyahu are breaking international law time and time again. But now here in Europe, it is time for us to act, to tackle this crazy autocrat in the White House. There is no question the Mueller regime has to fall. We're talking about a country where women are murdered, repressed. The demonstrations have shown that regime change is necessary. But it is the innocent who are suffering, and your job, Madam von der Leyen, is to speak out strongly. Say no to the war in the Middle East, in Iran, in Lebanon and Gaza. But we have heard not a single critical word directed at Trump or Netanyahu. Freedom and peace has to come to the Middle East. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to the chair of the ESN Group, René Aust.
Benzin, Diesel,
petrol, diesel, heating oil, bread, potatoes. That's the daily life of people right across Germany and Europe. And things are becoming unaffordable. For 9 weeks now, the Strait of Hormuz has been blocked. 65% higher prices for oil and similar increases for fertilizer. And those who suffer are people, workers who are finding it more expensive to get to work, businesses who are struggling to get their supplies in. And the German government has decided to give people assistance, 8 cents per litre, limited in time. So they don't seem to know how bad things are for people. But then, remarkably, Mr. Weber and Mrs. von der Leyen have called for nuclear power this morning. They were positive about it, but it's the party in government which got rid of nuclear power in Germany a few years ago. And the AfD has constantly been against that decision. Now, Mr. Weber said it's no longer about slogans, it's about solutions. But solutions aren't things that you can expect from the CDU-CSU, the governing parties in Germany. They simply bring out slogans, but no solutions. It's only the patriotic forces in Europe that can produce solutions. So it's good that the AfD is getting stronger in Germany and the patriots are getting stronger right across Europe. How are we going to fund our proposals? Well, we want to. How are we going to fund this return to nuclear power and the reduction in taxes? Well, we want to do away with the Green Deal. That'll make us money. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Dolores Montserrat. 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Europe has strongly responded to the energy crisis caused by the war, tax rebates and help for agriculture, coordination between countries to better manage the oil and gas reserves, elimination of trade barriers and an economic shield for families. This shows something essential, that Europe is not improvising, it's planning ahead. But if we want a safer union with more energy sovereignty, we need more interconnection, more nuclear and more large-scale storage. And particularly, something that isn't coming out in any reports, we need to do away with governments who are sabotaging the European strategy from within. Those such as Pedro Sanchez and Commissioner Ribera. These are the two people who are most responsible for the blackout in Spain. Yesterday, it was the year anniversary. This was an energy suicide, which was on the verge of sweeping across the European Union. It wasn't sabotage, it wasn't an accident. It was a political decision. The electricity grid was given over entirely to renewables, and the system collapsed because physics doesn't understand ideology or climate ideology. Millions of people were affected, people were trapped in trains, 10 people died. It wasn't just the electricity that went out, it was also decency and truth that went out. Sanchez ignored the reports and the warnings and the alarms. And when the disaster happened, he opened the textbook of the perfect socialist. He failed and then he attacked those who were demanding accountability. Honourable members, the blackout last year was a warning. While Sanchez is in power, Europe is in danger. And at the time of war, this is not just a risk, it's a real threat. Take note. Those people who are warning us are not traitors. Montserrat, you have a blue card. Thank you.
Mr. Glucksmann, you have the floor.
Chers collègues,
Colleagues, the war in Iran is continuing without us, but we are paying the price every day because we have been drugged with our addiction to gas and oil, and this is leading us to be subject to decisions taken by foreign leaders over which we have no influence. Trump's war has already cost us 30 billion euros, and this is the first time in 5 years that we are suffering from this lack of fossil fuels. In 2021, after the invasion of Ukraine, we saw that this cost France alone 10 billion euros. We can no longer afford to delay our energy transition. The high prices are turning our back on oil and gas is necessary from a climate point of view, but also from a social and economic point of view. So let me look around the room, to the right, to the far right. Stop standing in the way of the Green Deal. Stop standing against the climate. Stop undermining our climate goals because this is an attack on our sovereignty and our independence. Those who are not suffering as a result of these standing against the climate change, we are all suffering as a result of Trump's decisions. Thank you.
Madame Adrissa, you have the floor.
Voorzitter, de Europese strategie voor de crisis in het Midden-Oosten heeft...
President, well, our energy strategy vis-à-vis the Middle East has serious consequences, and even more so for the Netherlands, because we have some of the highest taxes on energy. So who pays the price? Well, your man in the street. People who can't pay their electricity bills. The Liberal government is leaving people simply to suffer in this situation. So how can we increase our gas and oil supplies? I mean, you continue to believe in the Green Deal in a blind manner, and that means that our businesses continue to struggle. Brussels continues to talk about electrification as sustainability, but who pays the bills? It's our citizens. But we need to provide support to citizens so they have energy available. We need nuclear power, and we also need to move away from wind farms because they're not working properly. Everyone's paying the price here for the choices that have been made.
You have the
President, Commissioner, nothing has made me laugh so hard as this quarrel between EPP and Socialists at plenary today. So, and they discussed the issue of who is cooperating with the right wing. EPP is supposedly working together with the right wing or not. It just shows us very clearly that this so-called sanitary cordon does not really work, and it doesn't make a point. It doesn't make sense. You are just all alike, one just like the others. And we are the only true alternative. We are not looking at who supports whom. We only look at the validity of solutions, good or bad. And this is how politicians should act. Now, as for the Middle East, Mrs. von der Leyen has just said that the most important solution that she proposes is to enhance the EU coordination and more renewables. I noted it down. And I would like to respond to that by saying that ever since Mrs. von der Leyen has been in chair, she's been doing nothing else but coordinating and increasing the use of renewables. And what are the results? Well, the prices of energy in the European Union have increased by about 100%. Car prices by 30%. Our share in industrial activity is going down, and our political and economic power is declining. And you want to do more of the same, in spite of the results it gives. And this road leads to nowhere, because so far the renewable sources of energy are more expensive than the traditional ones. And we do have traditional sources of energy that we could make use of, and they would be less expensive. And we should really get rid of the emission trading system instead of introducing a new one. So stop to the emission trading and stop to the Green Deal. And this will lead to a better life for all Europeans. Thank you.
Madam Wichlow, do you accept it?
Yeah, of course.
Madam Wichlow, seat 752. You have the floor.
Dziękuję. Będę mówić po polsku.
Thank you very much. I shall speak Polish. How cynical you have to be criticizing renewable energies in the parliament whereas your colleague, Mr. Jaki, Mr. Czarnek, is active in this sector. How cynical you must be to be criticizing the Green Deal while your government, Mr. Morawiecki as the president, he supported the Green Deal. This is a truly false attitude to be standing here in the parliament and telling us that it is Mrs. von der Leyen who's responsible for the prices of energy in Europe, whereas the conflict in the Middle East was caused by Mr. Trump. You should be ashamed. Somehow, the previous conflict situations were not caused by Donald Trump, and the results went in the same direction. Why did they go in the same direction? Because you have introduced the ideologically based tax imposed on the cheapest energy source. In Poland, the energy produced from coal is 6 times cheaper than the renewables. And it is not so that we do not want any investment in renewables, but this has to be done in a very wise manner, reliable manner, not in the way you are doing, because it is because of your activities, that the prices are 100% higher now.
Is Mr. Callaghan.
Since President Trump's unilateral attack on the Iranian regime, it's clear that we can no longer let our citizens be held ransom by countries that can withhold fossil fuels from us. The choice is clear. Will we do what is necessary to wean ourselves off fossil fuels and finally break the link between conflicts in one part of the world affecting the day-to-day lives of European citizens? Households, SMEs, farmers and industry are all suffering. Energy prices have been abnormally high for over 4 years, pushing up fertiliser, food prices and the cost of doing business. And this results in reduced living standards. We must double down on renewables and, especially in Ireland's case, offshore wind, solar and biogas. We must end the taboo in certain member states, including my own, about the potential for nuclear energy. Yes, there are many challenges with moving to renewables. We are too slow at permitting, too slow at building, but the alternative is to allow the Ayatollah, Putin or President Trump control our shared futures. Only when our economies are powered by secure, carbon-free electricity will we be able to stop worrying about the whims and actions of dictators and unreliable partners, the conflicts they entangle the world in and the damage they can do to our living standards.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Madam Newman, you have the floor.
Obey, or we make your life miserable. Resist, and we break you. Flee, and we find you. Even in Europe, speak up, and we come after your family. This is how the Iranian regime has ruled for decades. And now, they are expanding this model from holding their own people hostage to holding the world hostage in the Strait of Hormuz. You sanction us, we close the strait. You want negotiations, we make you wait. You resist, we create an economic crisis. Pure blackmail. And if they get away with this, dear colleagues, others will follow. This is not only about Iran. It is about freedom of navigation and whether blackmail wins. And this is why Europe needs to get engaged for a reliable solution for freedom of navigation. Against blackmail on the international stage, Trump is not going to get this done. But also against blackmail in Iran. Because while we debate geopolitics here, millions of Iranians live a different reality. More brutality, more executions, more censorship. And yet some in Europe speak of sanctions relief in return for opening the Strait of Hormuz, which would give the very wrong signal that blackmail works and that Europe turns a blind eye on repression. Dear colleagues, these sanctions were imposed for massive human rights violations, and they must remain until these violations stop. So, no handshake, no deal, no lifting of sanctions as long as people are silenced, executions continue, and political prisoners remain behind bars. This is what Europe must bring to the negotiation table. Baroye Azadi.
Thank you very much, Madam Newman. Madam Voiland, you have the floor.
Thank you, colleagues. There's now no doubt that Israel and the United States represent the greatest threat to global security and are a risk to social cohesion right across Europe. They have not only caused the worst oil and gas crisis in history and for the cost of living in the EU to skyrocket. Israel and the United States are carrying out illegal wars, bombing school children, hunting and killing journalists and paramedics, and targeting our UN peacekeepers. And meanwhile, ordinary citizens in Europe look on aghast, not only at the tearing up of international law, but also at their own governments and EU institutions who seem to treat the energy crisis as a natural disaster and not as a direct consequence of US and Israeli actions. Fuel protests has already shut down Ireland, and the protests will spread across Europe if leaders fail to stand up for their citizens, if they fail to hold rogue states to account, if they fail to end their dependence on fossil fuels, fail to break the link between gas and renewables, and fail to rein in the corporate greed and tax the windfall profits.
Thank you very much. Madam Knafo.
Madam von der Leyen, COVID, Ukraine, Iran, 3 crises in 5 years and the same lesson every time. Under your Commission, Europe is disarmed because it's given up on producing, because it's given up on its own energy. Disarmed because it depends on countries that hate us. And who's paying the price for this? Europeans. Every crisis leads to the same things, higher bills. Petrol becomes a luxury. The energy bills are a nightmare. The truth is, if we don't have wind, we need gas, and that comes from elsewhere. That is the big sham of your mandate. You want to leave fossil fuels behind, but we can't stop crises from coming. We can just stop suffering from them. Nuclear is our independence. Several years of fuel are stored in advance. Whenever our suppliers fall apart, our power plants continue. You have just recognised your strategic error on nuclear. So, Madam von der Leyen, please recognise this, but please act. It's better. Thank you.
You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, die EU hat heute weder die
The EU has less geopolitical influence and credibility and a strategy for the Middle East. They say continuously that human rights are important, but have no way out of the war against Iran and the serious erosion of human rights. The protection of the civil population in Gaza, the West Bank and the Lebanon are important, but member states continue to send arms to Israel and open their military bases for use by the US attacks in Iran. The EU can no longer justify the association agreement with Israel. What strategies are we talking about? As long as we do not have an end to the 6-year war in Ukraine, we can have no peace in the EU and no peace in the Middle East. Thank you.
Il signore Salini.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. The Hormuz crisis is causing an unexpectedly large crisis in terms of energy prices, and it's inevitably going to get worse because, quite rightly, the European Union has decided to confirm a reduction in our supplies from Russia. We still import around 14% of our energy from Russia, but in 2027 we're looking to fully move away from Russian supplies. So that means that the crisis in the Straits of Hormuz is going to cause massive problems. Now, there has been a reaction to what's happened, but unfortunately it risks just being a reaction. Accelerate EU has the capacity to increase coordination between member states, but member states are still divided on what they're going to do. That's the genuine problem. A reaction's not enough. We need genuine harmonisation in Europe among member states when it comes to energy. We don't have standard prices now because the way that energy prices are calculated actually deepens differences between member states. For example, we've decided to reform the ETS. One way of reforming it could be moving the ETS away from electricity generated by power stations. So we need to decide whether we're going to be coordinated on our energy policy. Thank you.
Herr talman, nu är vi där igen.
President, the powerful have once again created a war that is having an effect on energy, which is now making citizens suffer. We need to coordinate to make sure that people can still pay their bills. And we need to protect jobs in Europe and reduce our dependence on fossil fuel sources. Today, we are paying more for oil and gas than we are to Ukraine. That's absurd. We need to continue with our transition, invest in renewables, think of the future that our children will have. Because even if peace is reached tomorrow, the effects will cast a long shadow. We have to continue to take action on behalf of our citizens. We need to be more ambitious in the European Union for a greener, stronger Europe. Thank you.
Signore Fidanza.
Presidente, Ministro,
President, Minister, Commissioner, colleagues, well, geopolitical crises have had a direct and tough impact on our energy prices and also on our food production, and that's why we insisted on extending today's debate to this issue too. Clearly, the competitiveness of our farming businesses is under pressure now, so we welcome what Commissioner Hansen said on a European plan on fertilisers and also the Commission's commitment to guarantee predictability and stability to farmers in the near term. These are signals that go in the right direction, but we need to be clear. economic support alone is not enough. We need urgent measures that will have an immediate effect on production costs, and that's why we absolutely need to undo the effects of CBAM and ETS on the import and production of fertilizers. I mean, we continue to act as though nothing has happened, but given the increases in prices, farmers are struggling, and that risks feeding into inflation. We also need to take clear measures, for example, on a circular product that comes from animals, which could be used in Europe instead of fertilizer. So we need to ensure there's flexibility for member states, because farmers need immediate and realistic decisions such as these, and we're ready to support them. Thank you.
Blue card, Honorable Fidanza. You have a blue card? No, okay. Thank you very much. My next speaker is my colleague, Madame Bentele.
Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Colleagues, for 61 days now, an extraordinary situation has developed in the Middle East and on the oil markets. Now, the reasons for this escalating situation lie even further back, and we have to tackle this as the EU. Luckily, we are not involved in the military confrontation, but we are involved in the economic side of things. And we have to learn the lessons from the COVID crisis. Supply chains work on an international basis, and it is no longer a given that we're able to ensure the survival of these supply chains. We need to be much more strategic when it comes to our autonomy. We have to take strategic approaches to our supply chains and our trade relations with alternative infrastructure and military approach as well. Our diplomacy investment in projects means that we have to be more realistic to protect our citizens here in Europe. A government which bases its approach on inspiring fear amongst its citizens is not a good government. This does affect our economic interests and damages the rule of law. We need to focus on this when we look at our European foreign policy. Diplomacy with a credible military approach and diversification of our supply chains, common projects, and the promotion of democracy and the rule of law. Thank you very much.
Dear colleague, Madame Bentele, you have a blue card. Do you accept it from Mr. González Casares from the Socialist Group? Do you accept it?
Yes.
Señor Casares, seat 584. Is it? Micro, please. Micro.
The micro is fine. Now, esta es una crisis de combustibles.
This is a crisis for fossil fuels caused by Netanyahu and Trump, and I'm wondering why the EPP is constantly denying the fact that this is a crisis of fossil fuels. We need to move away from them, because you're talking about Trump and Netanyahu, but why are you doing that, given that Chancellor Merz is it said that Trump is being humiliated by Iran because they didn't have appropriate plans for the war? So why does the EPP not talk about the realities of this conflict? Why aren't you saying that this is a fossil fuel crisis caused by Trump and Netanyahu, which is affecting Europeans?
Sorry, I didn't fully get it, but I hope my Spanish is enough. But as said, I mean, we are talking about, we want to become more independent from fossil fuels. I think that was very clearly said by Manfred Weber. He said we have to rely on renewables. It was also said by the President of the Commission. But we cannot do this from one day to the other. We rely for our kerosene a long time still on oil. And this is why I said we have to diversify our supply chains. And we have to also look that we are ready to keep up with military means our supply chains. And I think this is what we currently discuss in the Strait of Hormuz. And I think we should be ready, because the next conflict is already on the horizon. If I look to Indonesia, who is discussing the Malacca Straits. So this is a strategic, it's a security issue, as well as that we have to decrease our dependence on fossil fuels.
Madam Bentele, sorry for the interpretation. My next speaker is Mr. Maniatis. You have the floor.
Madam President, the European Union cannot be a spectator when faced with the crisis in the Middle East. We need a holistic strategy for the region, for an energy diplomacy based on international law and multilateral cooperation. We need a strategy that will make Europe sovereign. We can't pay the bill for others' decisions. We have to take action in order to protect our interests and our allies. One example is Lebanon, where constant attacks are undermining the work of the government there and stability throughout the region. As Europe, we are face to face with our second energy crisis of recent years. The Strait of Hormuz have proven that Iran has a trump card that nobody realized. We need to be resilient to crises. We need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and our dependence on fertilizers. Thank you.
Mr. Herbrandi, please take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Energy is the most essential building block of our economy. And when energy prices go up, people suffer, businesses suffer. Why? Because we do not control our own energy prices. Others do, events do. The good news is we have already insulated ourselves from the worst shocks, quite literally, with all the homes we have insulated. Boring, but important work. And because we are generating more homegrown, sustainable green energy than during previous energy crises. But not enough. We will have bigger problems than strictly necessary. Because some in this House have worked tirelessly to slow down and break down the Green Deal. And this is on you. But I say, let the past be the past and focus on one thing, to restore our citizens' faith in Europe, in Europe's energy policies, to rebuild our grid and to renew our promise of a strong and independent Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madame Toussaint.
La crise que nous traversons nous...
The current crisis has made us face up once again to our responsibilities, and this time they are historic. Because as we have not turned up back on fossil fuels quickly enough, energy prices are rocketing and European citizens are suffering. More than 60% increase in the cost of price, €2 at the pumps in France. This is unacceptable. This is the consequences of our dependence on fossil fuels, and this is the result of using fuels that are killing the environment. We are faced with a war. Once we have managed to sever ourselves from Putin's gas, we are now in the hands of Trump. Do you realize to what extent this situation is ridiculous? I have 3 requests for you. One, as several member states have already said, we want to cap fossil fuel prices, and we want them to be banned entirely. We need to focus 100% on the energy transition. Secondly, citizens should not pay the price for mistakes made by the EU. We need to have a windfall tax on the excess profits made by the energy companies. And then thirdly, we need the right to a social veto. No European decisions can be taken which would worsen the living conditions of European citizens. Thank you.
Merci, Madame. Il signore Tamburrano.
Colleghi, la situazione che...
Honourable members, the situation that we're seeing today is not new. In 2022, we had diesel at over €2 a litre. The price of energy tripled, and fertiliser prices going up as well. We knew the solutions back then. Renewables, energy efficiency, storage and sustainable agriculture. But many people, even within this House, have been holding up this transition, leaving us exposed to the crisis we see today. Too many people in Europe, in the West, have peddled fake narratives. They said that wind turbines rust, efficiency costs too much, and electric vehicles burst into flames. People who are now calling for emergency measures have tried to get rid of the Green Deal. They have reduced our energy autonomy, and they've resisted efforts to decarbonise and to have sustainable agriculture. Do we want to find ourselves in this situation in 4 days or in 4 years? Or do we want to realise that depending on fossil fuels is a noose around our neck and that liberalism and budget balancing has failed? We want to drag Europe towards a social market economy with a broad vision for the future. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. El señor López Istúriz tiene la palabra.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. Look, I was listening to the Spanish spokesperson shouting at the president of my group when I hear right and left-wing extremist members shouting at the president of the commission, etc. Well, the old Spanish saying comes to mind. I mean, everyone's shouting, that means everything's fine. But it seems to me that we're talking ideology rather than acting. I mean, we need to defend our citizens, and it's not these kinds of raging speeches and wasted energy that we're going to help them. We need to produce solutions such as the Abraham Accords, where Arab countries recognize Israel and we can have economic development in the region. I mean, that's why the Iranian regime attacked Israel on the 7th of October, because they couldn't allow that to happen. But that's what the Europeans should be doing. They should be focusing on economic progress in the region and trying to help, as we did in Europe after the Second World War. Thank you. Mr. Lopez Istúriz, you have a blue card. No? Okay, thank you.
My next speaker is Madame Annunziata. Grazie.
Thank you for letting me speak. I think the latest things about oil is the fact that OPEC has entered its first phase of crisis. Many of the countries producing oil in the Middle East are deciding to leave OPEC, to have a policy that facilitates major production of oil. The change of position, the decline of this great institution that has been, OPEC, of course, opened lights on the fact that this war is changing completely the balance of powers and is giving more power and is giving a different line on how we look at these issues. I was listening to to President von der Leyen. She has been very detailed on the issue of what to do in terms of energy. But this is not a question of price. The redefinition of the power of the country that have oil in the future is destined to grow. For instance, the Middle East has a very easy way to become a lonely bloc with Africa, that now counts very little, but will count more. And behind them, we have the growth that we've been experimenting again of China, that has everything economically, but has no oil. So Europe has a large analysis to address. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. My next speaker is Mr. Weiners. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Commissioner, colleagues. We are witnessing the largest oil supply shock in history. Energy prices are soaring, driving up fertilizer costs and threatening food security for European families and farmers. Jet fuel stocks are critically low. Commissioner Jorgensen urged Europeans to work from home where possible, and President von der Leyen stated we should reduce demand. The builder, the baker, the bus driver, they cannot telework, but the EU Parliament can. My colleague Dicky Eriksson and members across groups wrote to President Metsola urging we stop the monthly traveling circus between Brussels and Strasbourg for as long as this crisis requires. We stopped it during COVID. We can stop it now, colleagues. Or is the EU above the demands it requires from ordinary citizens. Think about that.
Grazie, onorevole. My next speaker is going to be Madame Mathieu. You have the floor.
Dank u wel, voorzitter. Mensen in België betalen vandaag meer dan...
Thank you very much. In Belgium, citizens are paying more than €2 per litre for their petrol. This war started by Trump in Iran will only increase the prices. We are paying the price of the profits made by Trump and his oligarchs. BP and Shell are making exceptional profits as a result of this crisis. So we have to be very clear, colleagues. Whilst we are still addicted to fossil fuels, we will have to bend to Putin yesterday, Trump today, and who knows who will be the next to turn off the tap. This dependence has to stop now. We need a windfall tax for the excess profits made by the oil companies, at least 50%. But we also need a cleaner, more affordable energy that comes from Europe. There can be no energy security whilst we depend on Trump. Thank you.
Boutmans.
Meneer de voorzitter, collega's, bij elke nieuwe crisis, of het nu is in Rusland of in het Midden-Oosten.
President, colleagues, well, every time there's a new crisis in Russia or the Middle East, every time there's a new crisis, we see energy prices increasing, and we constantly hear the same thing. We're far too dependent on foreign countries, in unstable regimes, and every time it's families, businesses, and people in Europe that end up paying the price at the petrol pump and in the supermarket. Every political shock becomes an increase in prices for families and businesses. So that's something we need to do something about. We, the Liberals, want a clear plan of action so that we can move away from these kinds of energies. We really need to go for renewables, including fourth-generation nuclear power plants. We need a stable electricity grid. We need to invest in the appropriate infrastructure, and we need to make purchases in a grouped manner rather than this market that we currently have when everyone acts individually. And we also have to act more quickly. Everything's far too slow. How can we react if we drag our feet? We need to invest. We need to stop being dependent on autocrats. Thank you.
Colleagues, Ms van der Leyen has left. Have you seen her face? She looked ill. She's truly worried. Well, she can't really do anything else. Putin received the Iranian foreign minister, and Vice President Vance has gone to Islamabad. President van der Leyen instead is just looking on. The 20th sanctions package against Russia is approved. They've had 6 over the last 6 months. Increasing, in fact, 6 countries have increased gas imports from Moscow. And then they start thinking about the strategy for the crisis in the Middle East lockdown. They are actually just playing musical statues, or just freezing when the predator approaches. It could be a good strategy, but it's applied to the wrong subject. If they had applied it to themselves and to the Commission that President von der Leyen guides, then we could have avoided a lot of damage to Europeans. Thank you.
A blue card from Mr. Nardella from the S&D Group.
Sure.
Do you accept it? Mr. Nardella, seat 241.
Mr. Vannacci, you're always railing against Europe, but you've not said anything about Donald Trump and the fact that he, alongside the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, are those who are responsible for this war, because you don't have the courage to say that this is the failure of your side, which is continuing to lead an anti-European approach. Be brave enough to say, why are we in this war? Why are we so dependent on fossil fuels? Why are we so dependent on foreign powers. You just want a fragile Europe, and that is why you're not explaining why the effects of this war are not serving the interests of Europeans. Mr. Nadella is always playing the violin, and he's doing so today. And he doesn't remember much, because I did blame Trump. I said I'm happy with Trump as a sovereign leader, not as one who goes around being the sheriff of the world. What I said was that President von der Leyen is who, thanks to your support for her commission, has negotiated 700 billion euros of natural gas with Trump. And she also negotiated 600 billion euros of investment in the American economy. That's your Europe, not mine. I want to change it. And it's not me who's giving 700 billion euros in natural gas and investments in in American economy to Mr. Trump.
My next speaker, Mr. Botgan. You have the floor, my friend.
Excelențele voastre, să vedem cum stăm. 450 de milioane de cetățeni.
Right, let's look at where we are. 450 million citizens are awaiting solutions. That the cost of fuel and energy is so high that use has fallen. The average European citizen is only surviving. We need a solution to a crisis that is getting worse and worse. The conflicts in the Middle East are going to lead to further influx of migrants to the EU. This will give rise to a further weakening of the labour market. We need to tackle the migration crisis. Many migrants in Europe have not adopted our Christian habits. They don't adopt our values or the values of our society, but a lot of pressure is applied by the enemies of the EU and those who want to be politically correct. The EU has decided to uproot those Christians who are too scared to leave their house after 9 p.m. These inclusive policies are damaging Europe, and we can see no solution to the oil crisis, perhaps. But let's not forget who we are. Let's not. We will welcome those who are our friends, but we have to remain a Christian continent. For years, we have worshipped Christ and the Virgin Mary. We are a dome that covers all of the Christian churches of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nica, yours is the floor.
Criza din Orientul Mijlociu a dus la creșterea prețurilor.
Well, the crisis in the Middle East has led to an increase in the prices of energy, petrol, diesel. Energy prices are reaching unprecedented levels in Romania. Now, we're hearing talk about new supplies, new ways of using energy and ensuring that we can have energy available in the EU. But, Commissioner, what we absolutely need is a windfall tax on energy profits here. It's not fair that when things go badly, some people profit from it. Now, Mr. Weber, you were talking about the Romanian Prime Minister. He refuses to leave power in spite of his political support having been removed. I mean, he has impoverished millions of Romanians via his austerity policies. Economic activity has been put under massive stress in Romania, and we've decided to support the 90% of Romanians who want to see an end to those policies. The decision of the Social Democrat Party is clear. We want to see a pro-European coalition. Now, Mr. Weber, I'm afraid you've got it wrong in what you said. Thank you.
Vážené kolegyne, vážení kolegovia, povedzme si konečne pravdu.
Let's call a spade a spade. We find ourselves in a crisis which we have caused ourselves as a result of our dependence on oil and gas, and we are now paying the price for this. the depending on energy from elsewhere will always be a risk to our security. Let's be clear. Our well-being shouldn't be determined by those in Moscow or Tehran. They have always defended their own sovereignty. And those who are now seeing how we're suffering are blaming the Green Deal, many in Slovakia, but also here in the European Parliament who support Trump and Putin. They are fighting against the production of EU energy, but it is this energy that will set us free. Nobody can turn the sun off. Nobody can cut off the wind. No autocrat will be able to put a stop to our geothermal energy. Our clean European energy is the only solution in the face of oil oligarchs. We need to opt for EU energy. It is not only a cheaper but more sensible choice for peace and for our planet.
Mr. Notek from PFE Group. Yes. Mr. Notek, you have the floor. Seat 157.
Děkuji, pane předsedo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleague, for accepting my question. So you can see Europe without imports. So how do you want to build like new roads? Because you need tarmac, and this is made from oil. So how do you? What's your concept?
Vy vidíte svět příliš černobílý.
Yes, you see the world in black and white, or perhaps just black. You see, rather than one dependency, you see the only other possibility is to be dependent on others. And I believe that energy produced in Europe is a solution to this, but you don't seem to acknowledge that, and that is regrettable.
Do you accept this follow-up? Okay.
Yeah. Já si samozřejmě.
Of course, I appreciate the domestic sources of power. But if you decide to have no oil, then you will have no tarmac. So maybe it's better to diversify imports from different places. But without oil, or without oil import, you will not have any roads. So what can you say about that?
Well, we're talking about diversification, but it's the world market that sets the prices. Your Prime Minister is more than aware of this, and you should be aware of it too. We need to reduce our consumption radically, and we can do this by producing energy domestically. That's the solution that many regions, including your own, are unwilling to accept.
President, dear Commissioner, recent developments have once again highlighted the high cost of energy dependence. In such a sensitive moment, it is particularly perilous to undermine those partners who have proven to be stable, reliable, and fully aligned with our strategic objectives. At a time like this, we must not disadvantage the dependable partners from the EU candidate countries, and we should support them, not hold them back. Take, for example, Elektroprivreda Herceg Bosna. This company generates electricity exclusively from renewable sources, cooperates closely with EU member states, and has consistently been secure and predictable supplier in our immediate neighborhood. Yet, under the current design of CBAM, it is being penalized due to the use of national default emission factors, and Commission doesn't have any idea or any way to communicate with them in order to facilitate their export of the energy. At a time when we need trusted partners more than ever, we should not weaken those who are already delivering on decarbonization and contributing to our energy security. And simultaneously, we must consider the broader strategic picture. Yesterday, in Dubrovnik, at the summit of the Three Seas Initiative, we witnessed concrete progress, where multi-billion investments are being agreed with our consistently responsible transatlantic partners. New agreements with the United States were signed to strengthen energy infrastructure, deepen connectivity and reinforce cooperation with transatlantic partners. This is the direction we need to pursue. Projects such as Southern Gas interconnection, enhance diversification, reduce vulnerabilities and anchor candidate countries more firmly with the European energy space and together with our only reliable partner, transatlantic partners. And please, Mr. Commissioner, get this deal done.
Thank you very much, Madam. La señora Temido.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, protecting European citizens from the impacts of the current crisis in the Middle East on energy prices, on the availability of fertilizers, or indeed on the cost of living and dependency on fossil fuels is important, but it's not enough. It's impossible to ignore that one of the roots of this crisis is the impunity of these leaders after violations of international law and human rights. Several countries are involved in the violation of these rules, but there is one with which we have an association agreement. The Israeli government has conducted a policy of systematic violation of international law and human rights. In Gaza, more than 700 Palestinians have died since the beginning of this so-called peace plan. In the West Bank and the camps of Jenin, Tulkarem and Nushams alone, 32,000 people have been displaced and 850 houses have been destroyed. There's also been an introduction of the death penalty only for Palestinians. The next European Council needs to table a vote for the immediate suspension of the trade chapter of the Associated Agreement with Israel. Only in this way will we have a European strategy for peace, or rather than just repeated measures to live with war. Thank you.
From Mr. Oliveira. Do you accept it?
Yes.
Senor Oliveira.
Thank you. Mata Temida. Our citizens are paying for the price of war. They are paying in the increase of cost of living. You referred to energy issues, and it's worth noting that the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, managed to make a speech on the current situation without saying a single word about the excess of profits which oil companies are raking in. Not a single word on measures designed to control prices, to protect the poorest citizens, or put a stop to the liberal Far West within which these companies operate in destroying our quality of life. Colleague, is it possible to tackle these situations with the measures which the European Commission has announced? The Commission didn't say anything about this, but the leader of our political party did mention this, and this is why we are a true alternative to solve the problems which our European citizens are facing.
We have 21 requests for the catch the eye and a long vote after, so I'm going to close the list in this moment. Thank you very much. Mr. Wilinski, sorry, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, President. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the EU strategy to deal with the crisis in the Middle East. And I think it's pretty clear from this debate that there is no EU strategy on this crisis. Actually, things are even worse. You don't have a strategy, but most EU member states are struggling to deal with these increased energy prices because energy prices are increasing, but most of the price is taxes. That's the other side of the problem. Now, this was supposed to be a military intervention in Tehran. That's happened, yes. The Israelis have attacked Lebanon. People have been killed, yes. All these crises are happening. But I think it could have been predicted that the energy market would have had problems. So the EU, which constantly talks about solving major problems, isn't solving anything at all. I mean, you can't just intervene in terms of tax. I mean, let's have lower taxes on energies. That would be one way of giving people cheaper fuel, but you're not doing that. And those are failures, and you're going to have to respond for your actions.
Thank you. My next speaker is Mr. Weitz. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, good morning, colleagues. We are once again in a fossil crisis. We once again realize that we are dependent on crazy theocratic mullahs. We once again realize that we are dependent on a Russian war criminal. And we also realize that we are dependent on our former US friends that are unfortunately unreliable and that have co-caused the crisis of today. So good morning, colleagues. The imperative of today is reducing fossil energy and reducing fossil dependency also of fertilizers. And I don't understand how still parts of EPP and the right of this House can uphold this kind of combustion engine fetish. How you can still block renewable energy, how you can still slow down the construction of a good electric grid. I don't get your point. It's bad for economy, it's bad for people, it's bad for energy prices. So come on, people, let's get going now, and we need to replace fossil fuels by our own homegrown renewable energy. And to Madam von der Leyen, who is still not here anymore, replacing fossil dependency by a dependency on imported uranium, which we don't have in the European Union, is a dead-end street. So please stop this fossil lobbying. Thank you very much.
Mr. Weitz, you have a blue card from Mr. Verhoeven from the EPP group. You accept it? Please, Mr. Verhoeven, seat 333.
Ja, ganz herzlichen Dank, Herr Kollege. Sie sprechen, wir sollen von...
Well, colleague, thank you very much. You're saying that we need to move away from fossil fuels. I mean, I fully support you, but why is your group against, though, using more wood rather than fossil fuels? Why is your group against using sustainable fuels from grain so that we can move away from fossil fuels? We have the technology, we can do that in Europe, but your group, your party wants to prevent these possibilities. So why do you want to do that? I mean, we have the possibility to produce biofuels, we can use wood from our forests, but your group's against that. Why?
An example for fake news. Greens are standing up for a sustainable forestry, for a forestry that does not destroy the soil, that is sustainably providing us, it is resilient in times of climate crisis. And sorry, colleague, you are very much advocating for the monoculture strategies of the past. And sorry to say, to produce grains with artificial fertilizers, with pesticides, with tractors, with the work of our farmers, and then pouring all of this into our tanks of combustion engines with 35% energy use. This calculation doesn't work, and sorry to say, I just find it immoral to put food that we can eat into our tanks instead of electrifying our cars. This is not a strategy for the future.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Our next speaker is Madame Pichovic.
Wiecie, kim nie możemy być?
We cannot afford to be a hostage to the White House. How much I'm paying for the plane ticket or for petrol should not depend on the White House. The prices of energy have shot up by 85%. Lufthansa has scrapped 20,000 flights. The president of the International Energy Agency says we will have enough fuel for 6 months. I'm saying no. I'm responsible as a rapporteur for CEF 3. This makes it possible for fuel prices to be reduced, for our energy security to be increased. Under CEF, it will be possible for the first time to finance alternative fuels to be produced here. We want to produce jet fuel here. Poland wants to start on a path of nuclear energy. Many countries opt for green energy, but we want to be self-sufficient and independent. How much we are paying for energy, how much we are paying for plane tickets shouldn't depend on a conflict somewhere else. We cannot be a hostage to the fancies of the White House.
Excuse me? You don't want to? All right. I will now call to the floor Mrs. Georgieva. You have 1 minute, please.
Many believe that
politics and integrity don't go together. I believe they do, if one dares, of course. Our responses to the Middle East situation are predictable, too slow, and above all, ineffective and selective. So when Merz speaks about Trump in a way that normalizes dangerous escalation in Iran, that's not even realpolitik. It's irresponsible. The EU must not follow the imposed rules of escalation, even less legitimize it. This is no distant geopolitical game. This is a crisis created by genocidal Israeli Prime Minister and his puppets. And while they wage war, European citizens foot the bill. One bill at a time, all Europeans are being punished for a war we did not start. But we can help end it. Diplomacy is powerful if one dares. Through a clear, united foreign policy stance, that's the fastest way to ease the energy crisis, and we must, of course, stop our dependence on others because we are vulnerable with that. It's time we dare be firm and credible, have the integrity, dare think for ourselves, stand for international law, peace, and protection of our EU citizens. It's possible to do all three. I promise.
Thank you, Mr. Nortek. You have 1 minute, please.
Děkuji, paní předsedající, kolegové.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear colleague, Commissioner. It is naive to think that Europe will be able to do without fossil fuels in this century. This means that Green Deal and renewables, yes, they will be important, but there can't be too many, and people don't want them because they are not cheap. So the climate targets of European Union must be redesigned, and we must use our own resources like our own gas. We must invest in nuclear, and when we have enough of that, then we can think of reducing or stopping fossil fuels. But now we need fertilizers, steel, and glass, and we must support them by no ETS. And if you don't understand that, it will be detrimental for Europe.
Knocket, you have 2 blue cards. All right, Mr. Sieper.
Danke, Herr Kollege.
Well, thank you, colleague. I'll speak German. Well, thank you for accepting the blue card. Now, you come from a group that's constantly against the circular economy and renewables. So exactly the reason why we're dependent on dictators like Putin and geopolitical crises, as the one we're seeing with Iran now. Do you think that we could have prevented this crisis if we had gone for solar and wind energy years ago? I mean, would that mean that energy prices were lower? And, I mean, when did you lose the ability to believe? You said we just simply wouldn't be able to manage it. So, thank you.
Thank you for the question. It's clear that there is an oil crisis once per some time. Once in 30 years, it can happen and we can manage it. Your solution is to replace one dependency for another dependency. So if you just replace oil and fossil fuels by renewables only, you will maybe lose the dependency on countries delivering the fossil fuels, but you will increase the dependency on countries delivering the metals, for example, or some technologies, some green technologies. So the answer is having diversified, mixed diversified technology and not just focus on one shot.
Thank you. Mr. Sieper, back for 30 seconds.
Colleague, I'm wondering if you ever read about renewable energies, about how solar energy, wind energy, water energy works. Because if you did, you would realize that all of this we can produce here. We have the sun, we have the wind, we have the water in Europe. So the only thing that we would be dependable on if we would go for renewable energies in Europe would be European nature. And I personally think that's a pretty damn good thing to depend on, don't you think?
As I said, renewables will always have a share, but you need metals that are not in Europe. Okay, so you replace dependency for the another. So also the dependencies must be diversified on the sources and also on the suppliers. I don't know what you don't get on this. It's clear.
Thank you. Mr. Fuchsang, it's your turn.
Thank you. Thank you, colleague. So would you agree that, okay, so we will need some metals for renewable energy, but in contrast to oil and gas, which we don't have in Europe, 98% of the oil and gas we consume, we import in Europe. In contrast to that, the metals, we can get that also from Europe. We can reuse the metals to a much larger degree than we do today, and we can also have mining projects in Europe so we can provide for ourselves. That's not possible with oil and gas because we don't have it, so we need to import it. Would you recognize that there is a difference here?
Definitely we shall increase the rate of circular economy, and once we are ready and we have the capacities and we have enough, let's say, metals on our European continent to recycle and go without major imports, then we can cut off the fossil fuels. That's it. That's the strategy of smarter states. They also go outside the fossil fuels. Just the speed is in line with the speed up of this self-sufficiency, circular economic, and other sources. The problem of this part of this House is that you want to do it right now. That's the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Ripasi. It's your turn to get to the floor. It's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. It was a good debate. Thank you. Mr. Ripasi, you have 1 minute.
Sehr geehrte Frau
Madam President, Commissioner, colleagues. Trump has launched a war in violation of international law, and the EU has turned its back. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, and European citizens are paying the price. This is our own fault because we have delayed our development of electric vehicles and investment in renewable energies and allowed oil companies to make record-breaking profits. And now we have to deal with this. And it is our citizens who are paying the price on a daily basis. Now, the bill for the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which is whether it is correct or not, should be borne by the oil companies, or those who have declared the war should pay the price. That is true justice. And this means that we need an EU windfall tax now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vondra, you have 1 minute.
Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, you've read the recipe of the European Commission, and this reminds me of 1920 Goelro, the Russian or the Soviet State Planning Commission for Renewal. Lenin recapitulated it in the famous sentence, all power to the Soviets, and electrified the whole country. And we know what the result was. So let's not repeat those errors. Certainly, I'm in favor of cutting dependencies on fuels from dictatorships. I am in favor of electrification. But, ladies and gentlemen, we mustn't have the most expensive electricity in the world and blackout risks for that. And this is a reality today. The European Commission tells us wear sweaters and take cold showers. Well, we are not paying you for this kind of advice. We are paying you for allowing the full development of nuclear energy. Where's the taxonomy that will set the conditions straight? We have gas, we have coal, and we can extract them temporarily.
You have 1 minute.
Doesn't work. It schaut so aus. Okay.
Please, it's working.
Really destroyed now.
All right.
Sorry. Okay, thank you very much. Kolleginnen und Kollegen, Abhängigkeit.
Colleagues, dependencies are things we become aware of when prices go up or there are bottlenecks. And we're seeing that with fertilizers now. I mean, at the end of the day, these fertilizers produce energy, and they come from the areas of the world where energy costs the least, i.e. Gulf states. And all of this is coming at a time when farmers need to fertilize, and they need to do that so that they can produce food for Europeans. Otherwise, our food supply is in danger. So we need a short-term strategy, but we also need a long-term strategy. So we need to ensure that we have energy available in Europe. Perhaps surplus energy could be used to produce fertilizers at a sensible price. We also need to use slurry more. It's not a waste product. It's a valuable raw material. We also need to invest in research and the development of new forms of energy, and we need to look at plants and proteins as well. So all of that needs to be part of the Commission's strategy on fertilizer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fuchslang. You have 1 minute, please.
Thank you. If there's one thing this crisis makes clear is that we need more renewable energy and more energy efficiency. 98% of the oil and gas that we consume in Europe, we import it from foreign powers, often foreign powers that with whom we don't share values. And it's hurting our citizens, the high prices that we are seeing, it's hurting our industry. So we need to build on the Green Deal, and that's why I am genuinely puzzled by large parts of this House who work to dismantle the Green Deal. The speakers that we've had on in this floor just previously actually voted to just dismantle or to reject the climate target for 2040. The EPP group I saw on social media, they call the phasing out of combustion engine cars by 2035 a, quote, historical mistake. Why do you do this? I mean, do you think that that policy will age very well when you look at the prices for oil and the prices we can foresee and the dependency that we have? Why not change the policy in a green direction so that we get independency from fossil fuels? That's what we need. Who makes the historical mistake? Well, perhaps you should look in the mirror. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stoyanov. You have 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Madam President. The crisis in the Middle East has shown us again how vulnerable is the EU as a result of perennial short-sighted and ideologically motivated decision-making. High energy prices are strangling our industries. Price spikes and unavailability of fertilizers are putting our farmers under pressure. There are very few countries exporters of energy and fertilizers. Some are near active war zones, others are in tense relations with the EU. There is a real risk of shrinking yields and further increase in food prices. This crisis should be overcome, and the best option would probably targeted support for farmers to help them purchase already expensive European fertilizers. These funds, however, will come from the taxpayers' pockets. Again, they will foot the bill. It's important that the EU taxpayers' money should stay in the European economy. It's high time for common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Monsieur Penel, vous avez 1 minute, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Penel, you have 1 minute. This international crisis once again sheds light on the failure of the European Union's energy policy. As Germany and Mr. Weber and other heads of state such as Macron, Ms. Hayer, have sabotaged and weakened the role of nuclear, which is a source of decarbonised stable energy. You've therefore increased our reliance on imported fossil fuels, especially gas, and exposed us to geopolitical tensions. Ms. von der Leyen recently recognised that sacrificing nuclear energy had been, and I quote, a strategic mistake. One more. Today, our citizens are paying the price in their daily life for that strategic error. The tensions in the Middle East are intensifying the fertilizer crisis, which is exacerbated by the degrowth policy of the European Union. food is increasing in price and many farms are threatened with closure. Faced with the international crisis, the European Union policy is lagging behind. We now have to work on our sovereignty and the return to European power. I don't believe you're capable of it.
To stick to the time because we have a lot of catch the eye requests, so if you want to take most of it, then please stick to the time. Mrs. Keitinen, you have 1 minute, please.
Kiitoksia puhemies. Lähi-idän tilanne ja energiakriisi.
Well, the situation in the Middle East and the energy crisis have caused problems for farmers. There's a lack of means of production. Prices are going up. I mean, there is a crisis in the food sector which we can no longer ignore. Around 20% of farmers are finding it more difficult to produce food. And if the crisis in fertilizers isn't dealt with, then there are going to be massive problems in the near term. We need alternative fertilizers for our farmers. The situation in the Middle East is also going to worsen the situation with regard to dependencies. I mean, are we going to end up just more dependent on China if we move towards the clean energy transition? We need genuine solutions here, please.
U heeft 1 minuut, alsjeblieft.
Dank u wel, mevrouw de voorzitter, commissaris, collega's.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Commissioner, colleagues. Now, our citizens want us to protect their security and their well-being, but how many more indications we need that things aren't going well? Every time there's a crisis, a geopolitical upheaval, we are forced to face the truth that the EU depends far too much on others for its energy and its security. Now, I was born in 1976 during the first energy crisis in the end. And then when we saw the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine and the attacks in the Middle East, every time there was a new energy crisis, it's the citizens that pay the price. This isn't an ideology, the notion of energy sovereignty. It is a question of power, of independence, of our ability to stand up to those who are controlling our energy supply. We are too vulnerable. And Article 72, paragraph 7 of the treaty, it's not a throwaway line there. It is a commitment, a true commitment. We need a defence community as quickly as possible because the EU needs to be a union that can defend itself and its values. Thank you.
You have 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. Are you satisfied now? You demanded a ceasefire with Iran, and in doing so, you have granted breathing space to a regime built on terror, a regime you chose to shield. As a European, I'm deeply ashamed. It seems that for the European Union, lives of ordinary Iranians have no value. You have, de facto, been saving an Islamist regime. When executions by the regime intensify, as they almost certainly will, how will you justify this moment? You indirectly stood with the mullahs against the US and Israel. You got the ceasefire, but your friends are still keeping the strait closed and making us pay the price. If you want stability, removing the regime would be a real step towards it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Papadakis, you have 1 minute, please.
Two months of fire and murder in the Middle East. The fragile ceasefire of the Americans, which has led to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and the response of Iran have led to prices going up of gas, petrol and fertilizer. We're looking at a new navy conflict in that strait, and it's dragging European countries into it. This is a way of protecting high prices and taking advantage of them. People are paying the price, and companies are making money off them. On the 1st of May, our Workers' Party are demanding no blockade, a reduction in prices, and VAT on external imports, and proper collective agreements for workers. Thank you.
Mr. Vesligai, you have 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Madam President. The consequences of this war are manifold. However, one group that has been affected by them are farmers. The fertilizers have been very important in agriculture, and the prices have exploded. This has particularly affected small farms. The situation is clear. Europe is dependent on the imports of fertilizers, and price hikes contribute to higher prices of production and thus higher food prices. However, our farmers in Croatia, and I'm certain in other European countries, do not want to raise their prices. They are looking for subsidies so they could continue producing healthy and local food at affordable prices for our citizens. In order to make this possible, we need to secure financial measures for fertilizers and to boost local production. This is a matter of our food security, and without food security there is no global security. We need to act urgently. I welcome the announcements of the Commission. Colleagues, if we do not protect our farmers today, tomorrow we will not have the food.
Thank you, Mrs. Kedin. You have 1 minute, please.
Situationen i Hormuzsundet är ännu ett bevis.
The situation in the Strait of Hormuz has showed us once again just how dependent we are on fossil fuels. We are dependent on dictators, authoritarian states who have bought fuel from Russia and who are dependent on the US. And despite the crisis, despite the problem, we have seen this is a structural problem. And we are at the mercies of multinationals who set the prices for our fossil fuels, and our citizens are forced to pay these prices. The EU has to commit to stopping the usage of fossil fuels and provide subsidies and investments in renewable energies as winter arrives. This is important for our society. The Commission's proposal needs to go further with measures looking at state support for wind power, and why perhaps we could outlaw private jets as well. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Well, the crisis in the Middle East is showing the need to boost the EU's diplomacy and humanitarian aid. I mean, this is showing our economic and diplomatic weakness. These increases in the energy prices and fertilizer prices shows how dependent we are externally and how vulnerable our economies are to geopolitical shocks. This is not your average crisis. This reflects a structural vulnerability that still hasn't been resolved. We need a brave and coordinated European strategy that includes the pooling of fuel reserves and the protection of consumers and businesses. But we need an overarching strategy to decarbonize our economy as well. In Portugal, for example, we've shown that investing consistently in renewable energies enables us to reduce dependencies, stabilize costs, and improve things for our citizens. 75% of Portuguese electricity comes from renewables, and that's also why we need to electrify the European Union. We need common energy infrastructure for Europe in the context of a single energy market, and we need that now. The Portuguese example shows that the energy transition is already something that can contribute to competitiveness, resilience, and a European strategy. We need to be able to work together as allies. Thank you.
Goncalves.
Well, thank you for accepting my question. Well, we know that during recent months, Portuguese and European citizens have suffered as a result of increases in petrol and natural gas prices. But the problem here as well is profit. Gallup announced a 41% increase in profits. BP announced a 130% increase in profits. Now, we believe that these profits are excessive, and we've asked the Portuguese government to tax these windfall profits. Now, can we count on you and your parliamentary group in that demand to the Portuguese government? Well, thank you very much. Both the Portuguese government and the PSD group in the European Parliament have brought up this need to tax these windfall profits. We have an opportunity here for more tax justice. We need to reduce taxes on those who have the lowest incomes and increase them on those who have the highest incomes, of course. Thank you.
Mrs. Blinkevičiūtė. You have 1 minute, please.
The ongoing Middle East crisis makes us identify consequences here in Europe, growing poverty, increasing social inequality and social tensions, rapidly increasing prices of energy, fuel, transport are hitting hardest not only those who are vulnerable or low-income families, but also middle-income families. More and more people are being forced to choose between basic necessities, and this is not the Europe we were aspiring for. That's why I urge the Commission to take immediate measures to mitigate the consequences of this crisis, to include concrete proposals into the upcoming poverty strategy and the European Pillar of Social Rights. We need to reinstate the SURE instruments, present proposals for targeted income support, reduce energy prices. Support must reach those who are in real need. This crisis once again will test EU's social and economic resilience. That's why the European Union needs to act immediately.
You have 1 minute, please.
Do we realize that President von der Leyen today didn't even mention agriculture? I understand why, because for some people, industry compared to small farmers such as me is obvious, but to ignore the issue, not to admit the effects of her strategy based on importing fertilizer and low-cost food will not save anyone, not farmers and not families. A packet of pasta at 90 cents by the summer could be over €1, an increase of 10% because of the increase in the cost of fossil fuel-created fertilizer that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. This is one of the prices we're paying for our reliance. While Africa is facing famine, in Iran and in Lebanon, people are dying for a pointless war based on diabolical economic interests of men who many of you consider allies. So I'd like to ask the Commission to do the only sensible thing, create a European strategy so that agriculture is no longer reliant on external forces. Invest in circular economy for small families and farmers. Thank you.
Very sorry to interrupt, but we need to stick to the time. Mr. Frakos, you have 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. We are looking at weak leaders. We are looking at musical chairs. We are supposed to have Beethoven as our anthem, but now we're seeing that the loudest music is our reliance on energy. Even before these wars, we had the most expensive energy of all. Today, those of us who are worshipping our passivity are condemning us to poverty. We need to disconnect our energy now. The connection between Greece and Cyprus should have happened yesterday. East Med should have happened yesterday. And once again, these public works need to take place from Finland to Portugal. We all have an interest in this. Let's look the truth in the face. It's in all of our interest. It's about self-respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur Botenga. You have 1 minute, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner. Now, a farmer came to see me and said, now, you work for Europe. So tell me something. It takes me an hour to get to work, an hour to drive there with the cost of fuel. It's completely impossible. Now, why don't you go and can you take that message to the Commission? And he's right, because he doesn't have a plane, he doesn't have a private jet, a private chauffeur, he doesn't earn 30,000 euros a month, but he has to get to work. And the responsibility which the EU bears for this is enormous. This crisis without the Americans would never have happened if Trump hadn't decided to attack Iran illegally. Well, the Strait of Hormuz would remain open. Fine, but during this war, oil multinationals have been making 80 billion euros worth of profit per day. This is a vast amount. So why aren't you acting? Why aren't you taxing these profits? Why aren't you providing subsidies for our citizens? And finally, tell Trump to stop.
Merci. Mr. Sanchez-Amor, you have 1 minute, please.
I'm using Spanish, President. A la vista del enfoque del debate.
Well, it seems that war is only painful when it hits us in the pocket. For 2 months, we've been talking about politicians' responsibility for this illegal war, lack of a plan, lack of communication with allies, the victims, but the right wing only wants to talk about this war when it hits us in the pocket. So that shows who's responsible, I think, a little bit. But we've talked about Russia. We've talked about what's going on in Ukraine, the damage, the cost of reconstruction. Does that go for Lebanon and Gaza as well? I mean, we're calling on Russia to pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine, but are we not going to call on Israel to pay for the reconstruction of Gaza and Lebanon? I mean, we're talking about a joint investigating team in Eurojust. We're talking about an international court. We're talking about terrible crimes. I mean, we're doing that for Ukraine, but are we going to continue to talk about the war in Iran as a disaster for which no one is responsible? I mean, all of this is undermining the EU's credibility on the international stage. Thank you.
In the Middle East, a war that we didn't choose is today dictating our energy prices. Bills are spiraling, and it's the lowest earners and SMEs and farmers who are paying the price for that every day. The Commission wants to accelerate the EU, according to their plan. That's fine, but in order to accelerate, we're going to need fuel, and that fuel is the massive funding that we still don't have. The response is not to run into Moscow's arms or to give in to the blackmail issued by Washington. Diversifying is fine, but it's not a strategy. The real answer is to produce our own energy at home. To do that, we need to turn the announced decarbonisation bank into an electrification bank. It should be a huge lever to help with our independence. We should massively electrify now. This is the only way out. It's our sovereignty is at stake.
Mr.
Mr. Grittler, you have a blue card from Mr. Zygojowski. Would you like to accept it? Yes.
Thank you very much. I have it for you, the questions. Also, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I have it. The questions. Also, you said that the solution is electricization of the Europe. But do you think that in the short time we can solve it in other way? Give an advice to Mr. Šefčovič what he has to do with this situation and how he can really manage it, European Commission, to unblock this situation. Also, do you have it here any view of the situation from your perspective, what we can do together? Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you. Well, clearly, the industrial accelerator, I'm the Parliament's rapporteur from the ITRE committee, and that will enable us to accelerate electrification. We are looking forward to the report presented in June. In industry today, 30% of processes are electrified. We can get to 80% easily. And we need to boost electrification of transport. And at that point, with our massive electric production, we'll have more growth, more autonomy, and more decarbonised electricity.
You have 1 minute, please.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin.
Madam President, colleagues. The crisis in the Middle East has direct consequences for Europe, for our energy prices and our security of supply. SMEs, industry and families are the most severely affected, and we need to take measures to respond to this, but we are extremely uncoordinated. Kerosene has to be available across Europe, whether we're talking about airports in Berlin, Paris, or Rome. Secondly, decarbonisation is important, but we need the technology. Electrification alone is not enough. We need sustainable production of energy, a smart mix, not focusing on one sole source. Finally, I have a request. We have to speak with one voice. The Energy Commissioner says we have a big problem. The Transport Commissioner says, no, no problem here. We can only solve this crisis together if we speak with one voice. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a blue card, Mr. Gisek. You have a blue card. You wish to take it. It's from Mr. Bischoff.
No.
Thank you. Mrs. Brilkla, you have 1 minute, please.
Dziękuję, Pani Przewodnicząca, Panie Komisarzu.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. The situation in the Middle East once again shows us that the utopian climate policy, which has been promoted by the European Union, it cannot withstand the geopolitical situation. Yet another energy crisis. This one might lead to a food crisis. High prices of gas mean high prices of fertilizer. The only activity that the EU undertakes is demanding additional payments in the under the ETS and CBAM. What has to happen for us to go back, to make a U-turn? You are pushing production outside of Europe. You are putting in jeopardy our security. We need to do something else. More industry, more production, more farming in Europe. This is in the interest of all of us. We should not be pursuing this climate policy and buy food from South America. A strong Europe can feed itself and heat itself. It must not be helpless with respect to every crisis.
You have 1 minute, please.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. Well, yes, the crisis in the Middle East is having serious global consequences also for tiny Austria, which is where I come from. More than 6,000 drone and rocket attacks have come from Iran, and they have struck facilities in the United Arab Emirates. And this is a facility that's also run by Austrian companies. That's caused problems for them on the stock market. But then the effects don't only, of course, affect petrol companies and our oil supplies, our fertilizer supplies are also being affected. 30% of our fertilizer comes through the Straits of Hormuz. We work closely with Gulf states, and I think what we need to do is speed up strategic partnership agreements with the Gulf states. Thank you.
Domotor, you have 1 minute, please.
A közel-keleti háború gazdasági értelemben megint Európát sújtja a legjobban.
The war in the Middle East has struck the EU at its heart once again because of the increasing costs of energy. We have seen how much the increase in cost has been, 24 billion euros over the last 2 months, and the cost for families is even higher. The cost of oil has gone up 45%, for natural gas up to more than 30%, and this is the consequences of decisions taken earlier. A decision not to invest in our own energy sources or widening our source. This was a curse. Now we have a witch hunt now against the oil multinationals. So the question is, does Europe have enough energy sources? We need a new plan. I don't know what has to be done for these intelligent people here to understand that we need to change direction. We cannot sit back and do nothing. Thank you.
U heeft 1 minuut. Dank u.
Dank u wel, voorzitter.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues,
a devastating conflict in the Middle East, they're also dragging the rest of the world in chaos. And as always, ordinary people, whether it's in Europe, in the rest of the world, in the region, are paying a very high price. And Europe is standing by and watching it happen. And the reason is a very inconvenient truth. It is because we apply double standards in our foreign policy. When Russia violates international law, we act, and rightly so. We impose sanctions, stand united, take clear positions. But when others do the same, our responses become very cautious. We go silent. And that is also the case for trade. Access to our market comes with a commitment to our shared values. When violation happens constantly in Gaza, in the West Bank, and now also Lebanon, we must act. The EU-Israel Association Agreement must be suspended. Please, we have to act now.
Mr. Madison, you have 1 minute, please.
Thanks so much, dear colleagues. First of all, thanks for all the 2 decades over-regulation, over-taxation. When the prices are going up, you're just whining and blaming the Trump. Trump is guilty. Some of you from the Greens are saying that, oh, the nurse has to drive 1 hour in the morning to work, and now the fuel price is over 2 euros per litre. Yeah, but you know, in the EU, over 50% of the fuel price are going for the taxes, while in the US, only 20%. It's thanks for you, this nurse is paying over 2 euros per litre. You're saying about the green energy. Yes, we have done it for last 7 years, the green ideology, and the prices are just going up. Can we cut all the fossil fuels? No, it's impossible by technology. You know about Estonia, from my own country. We have the best expertise in the whole world for the oil shale. We could produce the cheapest energy ever. We have also produced actually gasoline from the oil shale. But we can't do it. You know why? Because we have the emission trading system for the climate change. It's thanks for you. And then you're whining, oh, Trump is guilty, Trump is guilty. Look into the mirror. You are guilty.
Thank you. Mr. Sell, you have 1 minute, please.
In Europe, there is a shortage of kerosene. Lufthansa's cancelled 20,000 flights. Many Germans won't be able to go on holiday this summer. But then here we hear from the Commission that we know from the Commission that this shortage is a direct result of Commission policy. And it's therefore many places in Germany are no longer competitive. And then when it comes to the global climate, we are even more dependent on outside Europe. We've destroyed our own industries. What's the Commission's solution? No, it's about an observatory to monitor fuels so that things can be just redistributed. This is like in the Soviet Union or in former East Germany. Everything needs to be saved. Then the Commission has over 3 billion, wants to have over 3 billion extra euros. But it's important to know one thing. Those who are responsible for the loss of welfare, well-being, prosperity are CDU, SPD and the Greens here, and they can be voted out of office.
Mrs. Monte, please come forward. You have 1 minute.
Dank u, voorzitter. Ja, beste collega's.
Thank you. Yes, colleagues, the conflict.
Mulțumesc. Onze gezinnen moeten vandaag een heel groot deel van hun inkomen aan energie spenderen. Onze industrie betaalt maar liefst 4 keer meer voor gas dan hun Amerikaanse concurrenten. En onze boeren die zien de kunstmestprijzen stijgen naar recordhoogtes. En in deze context is het dan ook ronduit onverantwoord dat de EU koolstoftaxen blijft optrekken, waardoor de energiefactuur voor onze gezinnen en bedrijven nog meer de hoogte wordt ingejaagd. En ik doe dan ook een oproep om deze koolstoftaxen onmiddellijk te schrappen. En mevrouw von der Leyen heeft daarnet ook nog eens benadrukt dat ze meer nieuwe eigen middelen wil, wat de facto weer al neerkomt op geld te gaan halen bij onze mensen die nu amper al rondkomen.
Which means that people are going to have to do with less, and that is shameful. And we want to ask the Commission to support the Member States when it comes to implementing the new strategy, and we need to look at supporting the access to fertilisers today rather than wait. And we also want to work on making the application processes more flexible when it comes to being able to use those. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Altola, you have 1 minute, please.
Madam President, Commissioner, the Strait has been blocked for over a month, and the consequences are already being felt in our energy markets. Yet the headlines too often overlook the longer-term consequences that are beginning to unfold. If this crisis continues into May, we are likely to face significant fertilizer shortages next year. That means higher food prices for ordinary families across Europe. Geopolitical crises are never isolated events. The decisions we make today and those we delay will shape living standards for years to come. The EU's response must therefore be coherent, strategic and firmly grounded in the long-term interests of our citizens. Europeans cannot afford to cost short-sighted decisions. We must act responsibly, protect our next generation and ensure that our policies are driven by strategy, not by impulse of unreliable leaders from abroad.
Thank you. We are going to go through the Catch the Eye procedure. I received so many requests, 21. We don't have the time to take them all. So I will take as much as possible. Please stick to your time. We will start with Mr. Jonski, 491. Mr. Jonski, 491. Yes.
Bardzo dziękuję, Pani Przewodnicząca.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very important discussion because it refers to all Europeans. And even though no EU country started the conflict in the East, it touches all of us. This is why the European Union must have its own energy independence, because this impacts our prices, our security and our stabilization. Therefore, do not listen to the populists who do not want wind energy. We should build it like in Poland. Then build nuclear plants as we do it in Poland. We will build the first one soon, and we're discussing about the second one. And thirdly, react in crisis and conflict situations as we do it. We lower taxes so that the fuels are cheaper, both oil and others. We have the cheapest prices in the whole Europe. And we must change ETS with these prices so that our European economy is competitive. The revision must be done. And fifth of all, Europe is too important to give it into the hands of populists.
Mrs. Maria Grappini, 542.
Domnule comisar, stimați...
Commissioner, colleagues, again, we are debating a very important subject, but this is not the first time we've debated it. The President of the Commission is telling us what we should do from 2019, but she never does anything actually. Yes, we need the single market, one market, we need the solidarity plan, we need to cut out speculation from the energy sector. We've been discussing all of this for years and years. But Commissioner, I think we need to take things seriously now. Clear measures to cut energy prices because we are dependent. But when did we create this dependency? When the war in Iran started? No, we've had this dependency for a long time. Of course, we can't expect miracles overnight, but let's do something because citizens are tired of hearing we should do this or that. Let's do it. And one more thing, Mr. Weber is a great hypocrite. He's no longer here, but he says that the motion in my country was voted by an extremist party, yet he votes with the extremists right here in the European Parliament.
Dona Cimento Cabral, 407.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, we're seeing a rise in geopolitical instability, and this confirms that
No entanto, continuamos fortemente dependentes daquelas que são as importações.
Very much dependent on those who produce synthetic fertilizers when it comes to phosphorus and potassium and other forms. We're very dependent. Now, we've seen more than 60% increases in fertilizer prices. Some measures have been taken by the European institutions, but we need to go further. We need to trigger CBAM for these synthetic fertilizers. And when it comes to nitrates, we also need to take measures, 170,000 kilos per hectare per year that's being used. So we can use the instruments that we have to try and support these fertilizers. We need to look into biomethane as well, so that we can make sure that in the agriculture sector we're playing our part to guarantee strategic autonomy.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, this is one of those times when the title of the debate is a bit misleading. Now, there is a crisis in the Middle East, but the crisis is an illegal war which was triggered by Trump and Netanyahu with very harmful consequences for the European Union. The strategy needs to look about taxing those big oil companies that are making huge profits. But we also need to get over the double standard, which is jeopardizing the legitimacy of the European Union and its reputation. There wasn't one mention in Ms von der Leyen's speech of suspending the association agreement with Israel. That breaches human rights and does not comply with the European Treaty. And when it comes to denouncing the attacks on Lebanon and the war in Iran, and also the apartheid in Israel against the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. Thank you.
Mrs. Sardone, 700.
Forte. La crisi è forte.
It's a tough crisis, and we're seeing very, very high bills. What is Europe doing? Well, it's got a plan to accelerate the EU. What's in that plan? It has got solar panels, more Green Deal, but it looks like you haven't understood a thing. The citizens are asking for something else. They want lower taxes, less bureaucracy, less environmental rules. They're looking at these spendings, and we've been asking for derogation from the Stability Pact. You did that for arms, so why can't you do it for the energy crisis to help families and companies? No, that's not what's happening. Ursula and Dombrovskis are saying, first, we need to have a recession. So that's like going to the casualty and then giving the patient the medicine after they've died. Do you understand? We need to try to prevent recession. You need to treat beforehand. So do not let this disaster happen. Wake up.
Smith, 510. You have 1 minute.
Dank, voorzitter, commissaris.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. The Iran war is making the energy prices rise, and it's stopping fertilizer production. We need to, what we're seeing is that the ships are not going and the farmers are struggling. What is the Commission doing? They're talking about transition. They're stopping use of fossil fuels. They've got subsidies for wind turbines that are only going to work in 10 years' time. That's not a solution. It means just waiting and waiting. You've had years. You've been looking at working against synthetic fertilizers and nuclear power and so on. Enough is enough. We need to be producing gas and nuclear power. We need to let the farmers farm. And we need to make sure that we don't have insecurity for food. We need to look at the synthetic fertilizers, not banning them. We don't want a green utopia. We want people to be able to warm their houses, and we want our farmers. We need to be able to do that this autumn and not in 10 years' time.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. 60 days with additional cost, as Mrs. von der Leyen said earlier, 27 billion for the countries and the citizens. But there is then southeastern Europe, who pays a very, very high electricity bill because there is no connectivity. Greece, Cyprus, Italy, Bulgaria, Romania, etc., etc. And this cost falls on the shoulders of citizens and businesses. So I request from the Commission to intervene immediately, because we don't only have the consequences of the war, we have this super huge cost that the southeastern Mediterranean and the southeastern countries pay. Do it now and do it quickly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Christine Maestre, 554.
Gracias, Presidenta. Señoría.
Thank you, President. One of the key impacts of the war is being felt in the oil price and in the cost of fertilizers. The President of the Commission hasn't said anything about the negative impact. We've seen a 60% increase in the cost of fertilizers, and the fertilizer sector in Europe has seen its activity drop by more than 70% in recent times. So we have to do something about it. It's not just the farmers who are having to pay the price, but also everyone, all consumers with their grocery shopping. So we need to deal with this through the customs duties that we apply to fertilizers so that we can temporarily bring down these overheads for the agriculture sector. Of course, we need to look at organic fertilizers as well and see this sector, this industry, as a strategic sector that needs our support. And finally, we need to support farmers. The Spanish example is one that could be followed and emulated elsewhere.
Now call Mrs. Valérie Deloge, 777.
Chers collègues.
Colleagues, currently farmers are not using their tractors, not because they don't want to, but it's because of the cost of fuels. We've seen prices go up to more than €2 per litre for GLR. And this could lead to skyrocketing bills for those who use many, many litres each year. And not even talking about increases in fertilizers. These are the specific effects of the globalization that you wanted. Farming is dependent on international markets, and that means that a war in the Middle East completely jeopardizes whole sectors. And farmers are only able to use the measures that Brussels has given them. And we've the assistance from Brussels simply isn't enough. And this is what they call sovereignty. This is not agricultural policy. This is just simply a band-aid on the issue. But the Commission is simply not doing anything about it.
Mr. Sieper.
Dear people of Europe, a few weeks ago I sat in a strategy meeting and a brilliant assistant, Chilla, told me there's a difference between strategies, projects and instruments. An instrument, that is our immediate response, relief for consumers and businesses facing high energy and fertilizer prices. That is right, that is necessary, but this is just a band-aid. A project, that would be more structured. A European crisis fund for fertilizers or faster permits for wind turbines, while Putin holds us hostage. But the strategy must be long-term. We need European renewable energy industry, independent from geopolitics, independent from dictators. And the same applies to fertilizers. Why import when we can produce circular ones from waste here in Europe? And that is the strategy: independence, sovereignty, security. So I ask you, do we want band-aids or do we finally want to heal the world? Because Europe deserves tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. João Oliveira, 125.
Obrigado, President.
Thank you, President. President of the European Commission is being quietened. She's staying quiet because of pressure from Donald Trump. So von der Leyen doesn't say a word to condemn the aggression against Iran and Israel's actions, the invasion of Lebanon, the killing of Lebanese people, then more than 1.2 million displaced in Lebanon. And so she's being told to keep stum, to be quiet by Donald Trump, when you've got 90 billion being used to fund the wars. And so supporting this policy under the leadership and guidance of multinationals. So von der Leyen says nothing. She says nothing. We must put an end to the neoliberal control of the energy sector, fixes prices as they see fit, not one measure that's being taken to control prices and to support farmers, to support industrials, producers, and allow them to be productive. Thank you.
859. Mr. Brown.
Madam Reichsführerin von der Leyen really sounds like Vladimir Lenin himself today, speaking about her devotion to electrification. But she does not, and you, most honorable ladies and gentlemen, you also don't address the real causes of the so-called crisis, because it is a permanent crisis. It's not a crisis, it's a result of some deeply wrong decision. The decision of November 1947, the UN Resolution 181 that enabled the creation of the Jewish state located in Palestine. So this is the real source of our troubles, of so-called crises. And the good news is that whatever was voted over once can be voted over again and revoked.
Thank you. Your time is
Thank
up.
you very much.
You need to respect the institution and the people you are working with, so we will put a note to the presidency. Thank you very much. Mrs. Winslow. 752.
Thank you. I will be speaking Polish. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. A while ago, we could see cynicism and populism on the right side of the ECR, Polish Peace Party politicians, who blamed the European Commission for high prices of fuel and of fertilizers. And they forgot that it was the idol who caused the war in the East, and they forgot that for years they made Europe dependent on Russian fertilizers, and that in Poland they led to a huge loss of nitrogen plants. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, indeed. Today, the nitrogen sector needs support. We need the ETS revision. Farmers cannot be those upon whom we put all the costs, and those plants, the Polish Puławskie Azoty plants, cannot be the ones who will suffer due to regulations of ETS. The ETS revision is necessary. Thank you.
We finish with Mrs. Fita, 467.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Comme en 2000...
Thank you, Madam President. The benefit for some is now making many Europeans poor. Energy prices are rising and companies are making indecent profit in France. The fuel distributors have actually seen their margin increase by 500%. And like Spain, we need concrete measures to protect Europeans. And the first thing to do would be to tax maxi profits. We need to have these financial resources to be able to redistribute them and to be able to invest in our energy sovereignty. And we need to do that now before those huge profits disappear. Europe needs to take action, and it's not the people who need to be paying, but the people who are profiting.
Commissioner Šefčovič.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Madam Minister, honourable members of the European Parliament. The length, the breadth and political charge of this debate truly reflects turbulent times the whole world, including Europe, goes through. Let me start by a clear statement that we all want the ceasefire in Iran and in Lebanon to hold. And we support the ultimate goal to re-establish peace and stability through diplomatic means. This, of course, includes restoring full and permanent freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz without any tolls. And this applies to all straits and all waterways around the world. As I'm sure you are aware, 85% of traded goods are transported by ships. And therefore, for us, the biggest trader of the world, this is of utmost priority. My second point relates to the issue of energy, climate ambition, affordability and jobs, which was referred to in most of the intervention of the honourable members. And as it was clearly presented by the honourable minister, this was a priority topic of the leaders in the European Council debate in Cyprus. And this is, and I want to assure you, across the board top priority for the whole Commission. We all share the same goal enshrined in the EU law, that Europe will be climate neutral by 2050. We have been very clear about priority of electrification, and this is absolutely crucial because electricity today, and despite all the efforts in the last decade, represent less than a quarter of our final energy consumption, less than in the US, less than in China. An Energy Commissioner, Dan Jorgensen, was present here, observed the debate, and is working hard on the grid package adopted in December, an electrification action plan and energy security plan to be presented to you in June. We just simply have to focus even more on how to increase proportion of electricity in overall energy consumption and how to boost sustainable electricity production. Let me recall that before artificial intelligence boom, our projection was that by 2050 we will need at least 3 times more electricity than today. With AI, it will clearly be much more. In the current European budget, we have still 95 billion euros available for energy. So let's use it wisely for electrification purposes. I also heard very clearly the calls for tackling immediate challenges linked with protecting our industries, protecting our jobs, agriculture, farmers, affordability for our citizens and protecting the most vulnerable members of our society. And I would like to reassure you that we are working hard on providing all possible solutions to these challenges, and we are ready to work very closely with this House and, of course, with the Council in this regard. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Šefčovič. I will now give the floor to the Council. Deputy Minister for European Affairs, Mrs. Marilena Rawana. You have the floor.
Madam President, honourable members, Commissioner, last week, European leaders met in Cyprus. We hosted President Zelensky, having delivered on the 19 billion loan to Ukraine and the 20th sanctions package. EU leaders discussed in Cyprus specific measures to address the repercussions of the war in the Middle East, focusing on energy prices, our contribution to de-escalation and lasting stability, on safeguarding freedom of navigation, the One Europe, One Market roadmap with concrete targets and timelines was agreed and co-signed between the three institutions. And, as was mentioned, following an initiative by President Christodoulidis, a discussion took place on how we translate the letter of Article 42.7 into concrete operationalization. All the discussions, including on the new MFF, were really about how we accelerate on the path of European strategic autonomy, of European independence. And because some members raised the question of what is our strategy, our long-term strategy, that is the answer. That is the vision, European strategic autonomy and independence. In Cyprus last week also, President Christodoulidis hosted a meeting between the EU and regional leaders from Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, demonstrating also Cyprus's long-standing role as a bridge between the European Union and this vitally important neighbourhood. It was a frank and substantive exchange that confirmed a shared understanding that the security challenges facing our wider region are deeply interconnected, and that our responses must increasingly reflect that reality. Together, we send a clear message. Restraint must prevail over escalation, and diplomacy must remain at the forefront. At the same time, this moment creates a window for more strategic cooperation between the EU and the region. The Pact for the Mediterranean is a vital platform, and we need to build and expand that strategic cooperation. Allow me this comment. I've listened very carefully to each and every intervention. And I want to underline this because later today I will be attending a plenary discussion in this House on anti-Semitism. We all have a responsibility on what we say and what we do, with zero tolerance to anti-Semitism.
Please be quiet. Please, colleagues. Please, colleagues. Please, colleagues.
The European Union can and must still be a driver for de-escalation and solutions to this crisis, not as an observer, but as a driver. And diplomacy remains the only way forward. A sustainable solution to this crisis must address the security of maritime routes, stabilize energy markets, and assure access to raw materials and fertilizers. The EU will continue to support negotiations. We will continue to address our security concerns and protect our interests, upholding international law and law of the sea, and we will work hand in hand with the Commission, with this House, on concrete actions to address high energy prices in a tailored and targeted manner. because, as the Commission President stated, there is no one-size-fits-all. We have a toolbox and we have a roadmap, including on electrification, renewables, interconnections, and addressing dependence on fossil fuels. And we will work to deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The debate is closed. The sitting is suspended and it will resume in a few minutes with the votes. Okay, dear colleagues, let's move to the votes. Can I ask you to take your seats? We will start with one round of political group speakers on the recommendation by Juan Fernando López Aguilar, amendment of the European Electoral Act allowing members to vote in plenary by proxy voting during pregnancy and after giving birth. This is an important round. Can I please ask for some silence? So I will give the floor first for 1 minute to Ana Miguel Pedro. Hold on. Yes, go ahead.
Madam President, this is a proud moment for the Parliament. It sends a powerful message. No woman should be forced to choose between her career and embracing the beautiful yet demanding experience of maternity. Reconhecemos o básico, a dimensão.
We know what the physical and medical requirements are linked to pregnancy, and we don't want these women, because of their temporary physical state, to be excluded and to be sidelined. Maternity should never stand in the way of women participating